top of mine up a fair amount, but yours have way more pictures than mine does, so I think I like yours better. Uh,
I can make some for you real quick.
yeah, you could. I attempted. I was like, Luke's gonna get like mad at me if I don't have like an AI-generated like picture in here somewhere. So don't worry.
All right.
I got you. All right. You've all heard the saying, "Fake till you make it." I'm about thinking, well, you made it. This is just a bunch of ideas I've had on um, mocking data in development and in testing and doing demos. And if you want to follow along, I sent this in the Slack channel, TechLancaster, GitHub repo of code, and the README is the slides you're looking at right now. So, Zach Better, Slack, mocktails. So just some, quick context here. I am Zach Fedor, Zach Fedor on all the things on Slack, on GitHub. You've probably seen me up here and seen me before. I helped Joshua to organize this shindig. But I'm talking now, so I'm talking. I'm a self-taught developer. I'm actually an English major. Yeah. English majors. I've been mostly working in React for like 10-ish years, and recently I've been prototyping like startup, like greenfield apps for a bunch of stage startups, most of which fail. So the recent problem I have is I'm working with a client who has a platform that they want that's powered by like a lot of user-generated content. However, they don't have users yet. They don't have users, and you don't have the content. You can see where we are stuck. All right. So here's what we're going to be using to kind of overcome some of these problems. I'm going to be using the tool called Fedor. I'm going to show you my attempts at generating content using some LLMs. And if we have time, I'm going to jump into a thing called MSW, which is mock search queries. Show of hands, anybody use any of these tools? Let's do Fedor first. Use on Fedor. Excellent. Obviously, LLMs, but what about specifically generating content? Two people, cool. Why are you not listening to the answer? Jennifer Hacker. Why are you not paying attention? I'm looking. Who's using MSW? All right, a lot less. That's what I was expecting. Cool. Hopefully, MSW is. It's like the secret nifty thing I'm going to drop in here again. I think it's pretty cool. Obviously, the presentation stack here, the techniques, really trying to like be stack agnostic here, so it doesn't matter what you're building. A lot of these techniques, the methods, the processes, they should be applicable to what you're doing. But obviously, I can show you some examples. They're going to be in JavaScript, and I have a demo app that's built with React. So if at any point you see like some code, and when we dive into like actual the application, feel free to at any point stop me and say, hey, can you like fill that out with comments? I slapped this thing together pretty damn quick, and I didn't comment. So hopefully I'll remember what it is as well, and we'll get there together. If you've been paying attention at all, you've realized that the React team actually deprecated creating React app like a month ago. So like if you're starting up a new app now, what the hell do you use? You want to have a great React app. They're actually recommending you to migrate to a framework. I threw this slide in here for Joshua because he was like curious what I was building with. The frameworks they recommend are Next, there's Remix, there's something like Astro or Expo, or if you're just using static site generation, use Gatsby. And if you're doing something weird and you just need like a build tool instead of the old Webpack config, they recommend going to Parcel, RS build, there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff. If you are absolutely tired of these JavaScript and all the bull crap out there, and you, like me, do not like getting around with tooling, you would probably like to create React apps because you could just get started immediately, right? Like who used it in the past? That's where a lot of the there we go. That's where a lot of the hands are. Okay, so I present to you something that I didn't build, but I found it is cool. It's called the Epic Stack. If you've heard of Kent C. Dodds, he kind of came up with this. It's a very opinionated full stack discovery. So Rails or Django or something, right? If you've got a lot of batteries included,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
fun for JavaScript, which you don't often get in the JavaScript world. Maybe if you like use Ember. But we're going to use Remix as the web framework because it's Nest. You can talk to me about that later if you want. I'm a front-end guy. I don't know anything about DevOps, but they've got some things in there to handle everything with Docker configs, deploying supply, like segmentation and CDNs, all that fancy stuff, and I don't have to think about it. It's great. Full stack, so we've got database, SQLite out of the box with an ORM. For you designery front-end people, it uses Radix UI as a component library, and it's found with Tailwind. I'm not a huge fan of Tailwind at all, but I love it in here. The aforementioned, I slapped this together on a weekend. So, it's got Tailwind, and I'm going to learn to love it, I guess. It also has just like a metric buttload of stuff that is has a metric unit of measurement applied. I think it has something to do with wine. What is it, Mike? You know, isn't that like a large barrel? I think that's a barrel. So it is what you are not actually being scatological when you say a buttload. That is a physical item. So yeah, and more. Hit that link. There's a whole ton of features. I think the whole stack is very, very, very well documented. Reference implementation as well as like a starter template, so you can kind of see how other things are built. And there's a whole bunch of examples of like if you want to use this, but do it slightly differently. If you've ever seen like a Hello World app that looks like way too easy, you know, it kind of like lulls you into this false sense of security that like, I think the easier the Hello World example is, the harder it is to do anything real with it, right? Where you just like start getting into all the potential problems. This is not a very easy Hello World. You get the whole thing out of the box. And I think that's kind of neat. So if you want to just try it out, you can just run a little create remix script. I recommend TypeScript. Install the dependencies, do all the setup. This will help you like run through some like interactive prompts of like, where do I put it? Do you want to deploy it? What are your API keys? Things like that. It's very handy. Very. So with that, I present to you mocktails. Ba-da-ba-ba. Hang on, get the cool. Ooh. Hang on, let me get there. All right, this is mocktails. This is my very real review site for very fake cocktails. I figured if we were going to mock data, I should make, you know, a site all about fake things. So, fake cocktails. We're going to be using this throughout the presentation. But back to the problem. How the hell do we get users? Has anybody figured this out yet? Oh, we got one hand. All right. Nathaniel, I'll talk to you later. We mock them. And not like making fun of them. I mean, like, we're going to make them up. You can mock them on your own time, I guess. We all do. If any of you, this is also a small tangent, if any of you are billionaires and happen to be, you know, thinking about purchasing like maybe social media platform or something, and maybe thinking about this being a great idea to like really enhance the number of users that are visiting your site, I'm not talking about bots or any real life situation that might happen in. I'm talking about just making some stuff show up on a page so I can show this thing off, I can build it, I can work on it, I can go to like the client and be like, hey, I built your thing. The thing you wanted, I did the thing. And with that, we need to start with a schema, right? When we're thinking about data, we need to think about what is the shape of the data. And here you have a few options, right? If you're in like a full stack kind of situation, you probably have like an ORM, an object relational mapping tool, or maybe you're like old school and you just like want to hammer on straight SQL. That's cool. You can do that too. I don't know what language you're using. Maybe that's type that has some like solid types to it. Maybe you're front end only and you're just working on like a React app or something with just TypeScript, and you can do some interfaces or types. If you're just working on JavaScript, your guess is as good as mine. Everything's an object, and any value can be anything. So what are types, man? You don't need types. No, I'm just joking. I do have a recommendation for you if you're still on, maybe on a legacy code base or something, or you don't want the overhead of having to work with types while you're trying to prototype really fast. So here's some example tools showing off this little user schema idea. For example, I'm using Prisma in my Epic Stack implementation, and here's an example of what like a model might look like, right? Where I've got an object, my user, I have 3 properties, 2 are strings, 1's an optional string, and the benefit of an ORM, right? I can even get down into like defaults, primary keys and relationships. I can get into constraints. I need to make sure that this person's username is not the same as anybody else's in the database. And the great thing about a lot of modern ORMs is that you can then generate from the schema the types that you need to use throughout your application. So you have it at every level starting from the database, which is pretty nifty. Oftentimes, you've probably worked on something that maybe was like client separated from an API, and you have to like figure out some weird way to like share an NPM type package between the 2 things, and yeah, it gets crazy. So, speaking of which, this is what that would look like if you were sharing those types. You could just go to TypeScript interfaces, and it's the same exact data shape that I mentioned, but we've lost all the database kind of rules that go along with it. But it's roughly the same thing. Maybe you could go a little further here if you don't have access to that ORM, and you can add in some like schema validation, right? Like when we're passing JSON over the wire, and your client gets this JSON payload, and then like you said you were getting a user, but you don't really know. You're just hitting JSON parse, and anything could be there. All of a sudden, you've got null or undefined or a bizarre bunch of characters that shouldn't be in JSON in the first place. You can write some like schema validators or just like a type guard, just to make sure you're working with things that you want to work with during runtime. Right? If you're familiar with TypeScript, all these checks are happening at compile time, not actually the values that you're passing around at the end of the day. And lastly, there's a tool called JSDoc, so you can add some doc strings to your JavaScript. Again, this is kind of like the lowest fidelity of all these, but at least it's a little bit of documentation and a lot of like IntelliSense and like VS Code. All of your editors will probably be able to like tune into how you define some of these pieces of data. And they all have the same pieces, right? Like, it's an object, couple properties, one's optional. They all have the same way to describe that schema. I'm going to go back up here real quick, and I'm going to take a look at my full schema file in code. And it's a little longer. It's 211 lines. But I'm going to show off, like, here's kind of like a simple way to think about how you are working with these relationships. And when you're dealing with your like TypeScript interfaces or your JSDoc strings, you don't have this access at all. But here we can say, like, right, when I go get a user, I can also select some other things that go along with it. Maybe the role-based permissions I need to look at, or maybe I want to see the current sessions that they have connected to. We could do a whole bunch of stuff with this later, but that's where that file is. So, with all that said, we can take that schema, what is the shape of the data, and then we jump into a function, right? Because we're programmers, we're going to start programming stuff. We're going to write code, make this do something for me. Let's just say this is going to return our user type, and from there we can just make sure that all the types match. Cool. I've got a user factory. It makes me over and over and over and over again, just like I've always wanted. But it would work, right? I could throw this create user function around wherever I need to have a user. Sharp-eyed among you might say, well, hang on. There's just one user now. How do we get other users? I knew you were all smart cookies. All right, this is where Faker comes in. Oh my goodness, good save. So, Faker, I love this quote on their site. It generates fake but reasonable data, not unreasonable data. That's a different tool entirely. So Faker is a fun little JavaScript library. It has a whole bunch of modules for like basic types. You need just a 16-digit alphanumeric string. Boom, got it. I want a number, an integer between 1 and 5. Got it. I need a date that's gonna happen soon. Not too far in the future, just soon. This is very cool. There's a whole ton of stuff you can do with Faker. The like API documentation is just hilarious to kind of go through. And we can pop this in a REPL if we have time at the end and kind of play around with some of the values. Because it gets better. They also have a whole bunch of like topic and industry specific modules. So like literally anything and everything you can think of. You need a color, like a standard web color or an RGB color or a hex code that I made earlier. There's an internet module. I've got, I need an email, I need a username, I need an IP address, version 6, location, street address, country, country code according to the ISO standard, not the Olympic Committee, because they're different. Do you know that? Country codes, Olympics? It's weird. Don't look into it. It's fun Wikipedia hole, but it'll waste your time. Anywho, finance, credit card number. Don't use this. It's fake. Airline. I know there's a bunch of airline and airplane buffs in here. You can make up airplanes. And then there's like funny shit too, like a buzzword, like synergize or leverage, or like a hacker phrase. And those are funny too. So we'll play around with those.
Other than, like, you gave an example and the number you could give a range. For some or most of those, do they just give you a random result, or is there something that you can gratify to give you something?
A majority of them have knobs, all sorts of buttons and knobs and whistles and doodads that you play around with. So like you can request like a username for like an internet style username, and you could feed in the actual person's first and last name or something to kind of seed it out of. You do all sorts of crazy fun stuff. So here's my actual user factory now that we've gotten an idea of what Faker can do. So instead of me being repeated out of my factory over and over, I'm going to go to Faker and I'm going to get a first name and I'm going to get a last name. I'm going to create an alphanumeric string and jam those things together to create that username that I was just talking about. And I'm also going to make sure that it's unique. Remember, our database required unique usernames. Jam those together, stick that in an email address, creating a password. I'll just make a quick hash of it. You can do all sorts of things with Faker. I have another example where I use it a little bit later. But now this is our nicer create user factory. It's not just me, it's a bunch of fake people. Let's look at them. Let's look at our users. Who do we got? We've got Trevor Farrell, Olin Lesh, Jaden Kubalis, Jordan, I can't read the last name, and then there's me. I am in here, but I'm just an admin user. There we go. My fake users. If I wanted to, I could, I want to make sure that this works at the end, but we can rerun my seed script and we can come up with a bunch of other people and see funny names that happen. Any questions on Faker so far? Okay, so what I'm going to do, like one of the things you could do with these factories, right? If you could just call them at the beginning of like a component and kind of jam it into like a user card or a list of your users, and you could do it all at runtime if you really want to. But if you have a database, you could seed your database with it. So I have Prisma, my ORM. It handles migrations. It handles seeding. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go through and make a bunch of these things in a couple of loops. I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to save those IDs. I'm going to then make fake real relationships. It's complicated, right? Facebook said it was complicated. Relationships are complicated. It's fine. So here's my seed script. So seeding the database. I'm also doing a bunch of like console times, just to make sure it's not going too crazy. Where am I importing users? Here we go. So I'm creating 5 users and running my little factory right there. I am creating it in the database if it doesn't already exist, passing in a relationship to the password and some of the roles that it has. And then later, I'm also uploading an image and kind of keeping that user around so I can relate it to the original user I made. So that's how each of those were getting this fun little Lego heads. And you can play around with the code and see how that all happened. But that's my seed script. All right. Now, at this point, this might be good enough, right? Faker could be all you need to get good enough data for what you want to do. And when we're building things, I think we should think about 3 different audiences. You are in that twice. Okay, first, you're the developer. If you're building this thing, you need to make sure that like the pages are working, components are right. However you're building it, you might need other data just to have stuff on the page so that you can rearrange it wherever you need. That's number 1. You as the developer. Number 2 is the client. Maybe they're not actually a client. Maybe they're a boss, a project manager, something. This is some other layperson that has to look at what you're doing and say, oh yeah, that's cool, for whatever reason. Maybe it's making sure you did what you said you were going to do, or maybe it's like an investor who wants to inject some seed money into this. The layperson may or may not know how to read Latin, so lorem ipsum could be confusing. I had a client once say, we didn't pay you to make a Spanish translation of our website. It's a Romance language, it's close. Gave him the benefit of the doubt, but I had to go back and do it again. Lastly, this is one I think that gets forgotten about the most. This is you as the tester. This is the one that is thinking about all of the edge cases. What happens when the name is longer than what the designer made the page for? What happens if that paragraph of text is way shorter because the user didn't feel like entering anything, and now the page layout kind of looks all jumbled? Is there a limit to the number of like tags that I can put on this thing? What if I pick every single tag in the database? What does that look like? That's you as the tester. So this is where you get to try to break it after you've built it. Good thing to do. But depending on who your audiences are and what kind of levels they're expecting, you might have to go a step farther than Faker. Right? So there's this trade-off between realism, getting data that looks really, really real, and simplicity. And I say this from like the rich hickey version of simple isn't easy. Easy things aren't simple. It's actually really hard to do things simply. Ultimately,
Curious, I mean, you were just talking about testing and all these edge cases generating the data for this.
yeah.
And I'm a back-end developer, but in the front end, is there a mechanism to like how do you mock up crappy data that the user will type into the form and see what the user experience is for that type of, you know?
That is a good question. Are you in charge of creating the mock data for the UI front end team to then work with, or is there like a separate
No,
tester
I'm not.
involved? Okay.
We barely test.
Okay. Oh God, no.
Like on the back end, you have unit tests. You can say, oh, well,
Yeah.
I put in this extra long string
Right.
and I expect that
Yeah.
this
The
exception.
database will kick it out because of a constraint, right? You don't even need to worry about it.
Exactly. There's
Yeah.
a variety of error cases, but on the front end, the error case could be, well, this time it's a modal error message, but the other time nothing happens, and I can only tell there's an error because I look in the console, for example.
Yes. So error boundaries are a new thing in React specifically, and I can show you an example of how that works in a bit later if you remind me. It's kind of outside the scope of what I'm talking about, but it's a good way to like find to break only small portions of your app and not the entire thing when that happens. But then in testing, I'll also show you another kind of like sample of some more deterministic tests that go through like what happens in the edge case where this is just too darn long or something like that. So soon. Faker, date time, soon. Anyways, what happens if you need more realism? We all need more realism in our lives. We've been living in fantasy worlds. So the fantasy world that I'd like to tell you about is how the I in LLM stands for intelligence. I don't think that belies my opinion on the matter whatsoever. But we know they hallucinate. They generate. They're generating data. So why don't we let them come up with fake data? It doesn't really matter anyways. So the first user of our app is actually an LLM. And this is like actually a strategy that I'm using in the one startup that we're working on now. We've created this persona of like the mascot of the application, and we're going to do this. So we're going to write a bunch of scripts to download some like similar related content, right? Like maybe there's content I can grab from Google Places or Yelp, right? Maybe I need to scrape it. Maybe I can get some off of an API. Maybe I just have to do some manual data entry at the start and front load it. I'm going to take that data and I'm going to run some analysis on it. Maybe generate summaries or like sentiment analysis according to all these personas that you can have. And then you can add that output to your seed script. The nifty thing about this is you can have multiple different personas, and if you like, I think the like fake AI user as like your first user kind of only works for some more whimsical apps. If yours is a little bit more like maybe corporate-y or like where that wouldn't float, you could have the like, we don't have any reviews, but other sites have said things similar. Right? There's ways that you can get around it, and you can add content where there isn't any using these kind of techniques. So when you're generating a prompt, right, you need that input, something originally to like parse it. Because if you just say like, yo, there's a bar around the corner, they have good cocktails, make a cocktail list for me, you're not going to get anything great. But if I go to Google Places API and I get the last 5 reviews from TELUS, and then I say, here's 5 reviews, get a sense of this place and come up with a cocktail list that they might have, I'm going to get a hell of a lot better results. Also, make healthy use of system prompts. System prompts are pretty nifty. Instead of like, if you've ever gone to ChatGPT and just typed in the box, those are your user prompts. System prompts are when you're like prepping before the user prompt, and you can come up with personas, you can declare a whole bunch of rules, things to do, things not to do, define better ways to like respond not in natural language but in JSON. Depending on which tool you're using, you can get a lot of extra legwork done up front with system prompts. Obviously, you're talking to something that's going to generate a bunch of big data. Try to figure out a way that you can get like parsable information out of it, and then have to figure out a way to parse it, and hopefully it stays relatively deterministic. Bonus points if you have a schema that you can validate against. So, in my demo app, here's my cocktail factory. I am giving some place data that I scraped from Places. I'm using Claude for this one just because I was curious. My system prompt: you are a yuppie blogger reviewing cocktails in a small but diverse and artsy city with a thriving tech community. Did I nail it? I think I nailed it. Anyways, the prompt is pretty long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing out. I have to tell it that it's generating mock data for cocktail review platform over and over and over again. I should tell it, hey, put the output in the output, and don't put it outside of the output, put it in the output. Because Tom, your talk the other day, you were talking about this problem, right? You're like generate, what was it, 77? 70? Some large number of things, and it wasn't following. But basically, I'm using the Google reviews and some basic info about the place, location, and like atmospheric stuff about the location. Asking for a cocktail for each, or a couple cocktails for each. Has a description, has an ingredient list, and assign a rating to it. And then sticking it out in, I provided like a little example output. That often helps a lot. And then I have to parse it. So I'm going to jam all of the text content blocks back, and I have to make sure that like there was an output like tag, grabbing all the junk in between, trim all the extra new lines off, parse it, and I told you I was totally going to type check this. I'm just going to say it's definitely right, and we're going to run with it. So what do these cocktails look like? Let's check out some of those places that I found nearby. Give me a bar. Who should we look at?
Shamrock.
Shamrock. Oh, this is gonna be good. All right. So here's the faker reviews. Right. We've got a lot of what is that? Romanian? Another Romance language. A few people laughed at that. There we go. And some fake images, but obviously this doesn't really help. There's only one review here. The menu. This is what we're all here for, folks. The Emerald Isle. Our signature cocktail combines smooth Irish whiskey with fresh mint and a lime for a refreshing take on the classic Irish spirit. Served over crushed ice with a mint sprig garnish. A Dublin Mule, the Shamrock Sour. Ooh, the Celtic Cosmo. I don't even know what that ingredient is. What the hell is that? Anybody know what that is? Let me get it back. Poutine? That's Canadian. Walnut Street Old Fashioned. It knows it's on Walnut Street. And the green, ooh, absinthe. There we go. Man. It doesn't sound like Shamrock drink, does it? Let's try another one. What do we want?
Coffin bar.
Coffin bar. This had one of my favorites. I give you the embalming fluid. Only a 3.9. I think a few people died drinking the embalming fluid. Formaldehyde is not one of the ingredients. It's got cucumber in it. It's got to be healthy. Some of these are hilarious though. Yeah, I had a good time putting this together. All right, back to the slides. Here's your image. Isn't it great? Isn't it amazing? This is my prompt. Generate a logo for mocktails. My very real review site for very fake cocktails. And it was like, there's something that looks like letters, a large portion of it. I think that says rock tall. It clearly didn't know if I had it trademarked or registered or copywritten, so it did some like union of all three. And I think this was trying to say a review alcoholic of frictional cocktails. There's an R there. There's totally an R there. And then it gave me my little text back. Here's your playful and stylish logo for mocktails. Yes, I probably would like adjustments. I don't know why I got playful and stylish for mocktails. I'm not making fun of anything. Okay, but for real, if you want mock images, here's something you could do. 3 services in order of fidelity, low to high. I mean, low to high, I did that backwards. Placehold, low fidelity. You get like, you pick a size, and it gives you a gray thing with the size. Perfect. Lauren picks them. Get a size, picture, but it's random. Or you could just like troll through Unsplash or any other like free image generator, and obviously like have to come up with a pile of these. And I used kind of like a combination of both of these. So if you see in my like test data, fixtures, I've got a whole bunch of images in here from some of those places. And these are where you're seeing all of all of the review data is using some of those that I grabbed off of Unsplash. And it's all random, so this reviewer obviously liked the hibiscus drink a whole lot and took 2 pictures of it. Maybe they had too many of them, and that's why. One too many. Okay, at this point, some of you are like, you totally said this was a front-end talk, and now we're talking about migrations, and scripting, and database seeding, and you lied to me. Some of you might be here and you don't have database. You don't have access to the database. You gotta go through that guy to get to the database. And they don't even test. Yeah, you might not have backend. Maybe it's just not built yet. It's going to be built, but you haven't built it yet. I, like Socrates, will answer questions with questions. What if you do have a database and a backend? The same thing can happen if you're in that situation, right? You might be working ahead of them. They could have ran into a problem. The aforementioned tests that they do, and it's down. Are all your tests going to fail because they fucked up? No. What happens if you're working offline? Right? You took a nice day out of the park, because we totally do that all the time as real human beings. What if your users are, right? Like maybe they're online first and then they go into a coma. Does your degrade gracefully, or does it shit the bed? Who knows? And like, what if the backend works all the freaking time, and you've got like site reliability engineers, and you can never test situations of low latency or 500 errors? What do you do? Well, that's where I bring MSW. This is a cool tool for intercepting outgoing requests from your client, observing them, and responding to them using mocked responses. We're getting pretty late in the evening, so I'm gonna skip some of this stuff. But the basic gist is this: you're defining, like within your front-end code, you define an array of handlers, which you can think of as interceptors. Anytime your app makes a outgoing request for a specific HTTP method to a specific URL, you can access that request and handle it instead of actually making the real request. So it can speed up tests or slow them down if you want to like add in 5 seconds of a sleep timer to like test how your app can retry requests if it doesn't get a response. And that's pretty nifty. So like a quick example would be here. I'm defining an array of handlers, intercepting GET requests to this very real website to get a user. And I'm going to make an HTTP response in JSON. And would you look at that, that's very similar to some of those factories we made earlier. Are we making connections? We might be able to use those. The sharp-eyed viewers, again, might have some questions. Why would you just write handlers for all of your API endpoints? Well, you could just write the API endpoints. You could just why do 2? And that I countered, right? The beauty of MSW doesn't care at all about databases, doesn't care at all about authentication, sessions, any kind of business logic you have. It's purely responses, the shape of the response. So it frees you up to be able to say, when I go to that place, what am I getting in return? You have the freedom and flexibility to like throw in some business logic, like I'm going to do a little sign-up sheet, but if the guy's name is Dave, I'm gonna fail because there's already a guy named Dave in the site, right? Like you could do simple, dumb little things like that, and that really helps in some of these test edge cases for when you're running some tests later. Small caveat, they handle this differently in the browser versus like when you're running tests in Node. The browser, it just wraps your entire client app as a mock service worker, so you don't have to change any of your front-end code at all to deal with this. There's no stubbing, there's no like mock importing of modules. It just kind of sits on the outside and acts as like a shield. It kind of bounces back in when you have something that can respond. And you can let it pass through and actually make the real request whenever you want to, or if you haven't handled It handles GraphQL and WebSockets if you need those. And like I said, we can throw our faker factories in there. There's a few ways in their docs for like if you need to figure out how to keep in sync between a backend that's constantly changing. So you can generate some of these handlers using your like Swagger documentation, or like taking a snapshot of your network requests and updating them over time, and that's pretty nifty. I'm not going to go into this, but the demo app has a whole example of making requests to authenticate to GitHub. So one of the ways that you can sign in or log in, right, you can authenticate using GitHub. So I went through this user flow that would be external calls to GitHub, and they would all be handled by the mock service worker and not actually GitHub. That's all changed with like a little feature flag if you need to really run it without the mocks intercepting anything. And it's stinking fancy. I love it. Just kind of like summing it up, the principles and the goals behind all of this, I want to personally test the outcomes of my code. I don't want to test my implementation. I want all of my tests to be deterministic. I want to be able to say this thing fails over and over again for the same reason, or it passes over and over again for the same reason. Anytime you ever ran into a flaky test, you know how absolutely mind-bendingly, soul-crushingly awful it is to have a test that, and you don't know why it fails every once in a while. And the other thing, I want to test flows, right? I want to see my user be able to complete their task, what I meant to build for them, rather than, you know, what are we seeing on the page and how is it moving around? The flow is more important. And when I say test for all of this, that could mean unit tests. That could be you poking around in the browser, like while developing, or just giving a demo. Afterwards, you can take these same tools and you can do some like end-to-end testing with Playwright, do like browser mockups and watch everything happen right now in front of you. If you're familiar with Storybook, MSW has like a plugin for Storybook, so you can do all of these mocking handlers, same stuff, and show your component code. So if you have designers that you need to work with, they always have deterministic stuff and realistic data to play around with. Again, going back to your, how do I get this out to the rest of my team? And yeah, you got your fake users. I mean, the real users just kind of come eventually, right? Like I think that's it, to be honest. I don't know what else there is to do, because clearly you've built it. So that's the end. Thanks for letting me talk about fake stuff.